So, I can't be alone in having a complicated relationship with Netflix's Stranger Things. Unlike a lot of people, I did not watch it when it first came out, or even when the second and third seasons came out. I think it was one of those things that was so popular and omnipresent that it actually made me want to watch it less. I put it off for a long time. It was only in 2022, with the release of season 4, that I decided to finally see what all the fuss was about. And even back then, I had mixed feelings. I had really enjoyed the first couple seasons, felt okay about the third, but once I reached season 4, I actually thought it had a lot of issues, and I was taken aback by the broad, critical, and popular consensus that it was this great season of television. But regardless of my opinion on the trajectory of the show's quality, I was unambiguously really obsessed with Stranger Things for a short time. Kind of quietly obsessed. I did not post about it a whole lot. I never made any content about it, other than that silly little off-the-cuff video going through my Stranger Things playlist. I think I honestly felt a little embarrassed about being obsessed with Stranger Things for the first time in the big 2022, so I didn't make much noise about it. And even if I'd wanted to, again, I was disappointed in the direction the show was taking, so I didn't really feel like investing as a big Stranger Things fan. With that in mind, I was not really expecting season 5 to improve upon any of the things I disliked about season 4. I could only see things going from bad to worse, so when I sat down to watch season 5 a few months ago, I was mostly just curious how they would land what I perceived to be a crashing plane, and all that being said, it was somehow still worse than what I could have ever anticipated. I have strong opinions about a lot of things on this show regarding season 5 and otherwise, and I've kind of agonized over how to format an expression of those opinions. I sometimes have to remind myself that this is my YouTube channel and I can do whatever I want, so instead of doing a simple review of season 5 or a season-by-season breakdown, I just want to air all my grievances, in no particular order, in a Jenny Nicholson-friendly, internet-friendly numbered list. And before I start, I want to say that I've felt pretty silly dedicating so much time to Stranger Things in the last couple months, given everything. I live in the Twin Cities, and it's been pretty bad around here lately. The federal government has invaded and occupied my home and many other people's homes, and they're harassing and assaulting and kidnapping and killing my neighbors. It's really easy to feel powerless. I attended a massive protest on January 23rd where thousands of people showed up despite sub-zero temperatures, and I was so moved by the passion and resilience of my state, and then the very next morning, ICE killed another person. It made it feel like our demonstrating had been for nothing. But I'm over feeling powerless. I think that's how they want us to feel. And no matter how silly, I do have a platform here, and I feel obligated to use it. I don't know what else I can do. So I'm making this video a fundraiser for the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. They provide free immigration legal representation to low-income immigrants and refugees in Minnesota and North Dakota. I donated $200 to kind of get the ball rolling. It would mean a lot to me and my community to donate any amount if you're able. And although I chose ILCM for the official fundraiser, there are a lot of great smaller organizations in the Twin Cities doing important work for the immigrant and refugee community that could also use donations, or in some cases volunteers, and I'm going to leave some of those in the description of this video as well. Thank you, fuck ICE, free Palestine, cancel your Netflix subscription, let's get into it. Grievance number 1, product placement. Okay, I realize that in a world where the season 5 finale exists, it might seem pedantic to get hung up on as minor a detail as product placement in Stranger Things, but this really stood out to me on my rewatch for this video. One of the reasons I started to feel so icky watching the show while real-life issues were knocking at my door is that Stranger Things itself has a bit of a cynical corporate vibe to it, especially as the show goes on, and it's largely due to all of the brand name dropping. Product placement is certainly an overt presence in the show as early as season 1. My personal favorite is this scene where Elle has an important flashback via a genuine, uninterrupted Coke commercial playing on TV, but most of it was still subtle enough not to take you out of it, and of course the story and its execution was actually good at this point, which helped to distract from the occasional bit of advertising. I remember first being bothered by it when I was first watching season 2, specifically this baffling moment from Steve when he and some other characters are eating KFC.
His finger looking good.
But season 2 is still, in my opinion, generally good and tasteful enough that the product placement doesn't overpower the show. Season 3 is when it really starts to feel annoying in a general sense that permeates the entire season. This season does largely revolve around a mall, so it does make sense, I suppose, to feature a lot of brands, but unlike a lot of mall stories, including some from the time period represented on the show, I wouldn't say the season really attempts to make any commentary on 80s consumerism or anything, so I don't think the setting is much of an excuse. If anything, it feels a little like a lazy way to intentionally feature more brands than usual, like how the Emoji Movie is just a bunch of ads for mobile apps. I could tolerate a little of this kind of thing. I get that it's tough out there in the entertainment industry. I know you've got to pay the bills somehow, and to be fair, E.T., clearly one of Stranger Things' biggest initial inspirations, famously featured some blatant product placement in such a way that it actually became an iconic feature of the film. It's not unlike the Eggo waffles spot in Stranger Things. It was no doubt product placement, but it also became a fun quirk of the show that a lot of people were into. A little product placement doesn't have to ruin something, and in fact, occasionally, if played correctly, it can add to the identity of the show, rather than reek of cynicism and desperation. Unfortunately, by season 3, and especially into seasons 4 and 5, we've entered cynicism and desperation territory. I'm just gonna play you some of the greatest hits.
Does your species like M&Ms?
I'm gonna go grab a Coke or something caffeinated, because it's gonna be a long night.
Gatorade for Elle's battery.
Someone say Gatorade? Let me get one of those.
And all this isn't to mention the countless brand tie-ins the show has done in the last year. I'm sure there was always some of this in previous seasons, but this is the first time I feel like it's been this noticeable. I go to CVS and see Stranger Things Chips Ahoy. There are ads on TV where Cara Buono tells me to use Tide, or a Hawkins High basketball player tells me to drink Gatorade. I got an ad on Instagram the other day from one of those gimmicky hygiene but for men companies for a limited edition Vecna themed bar of soap. That elusive scent every man strives for. Vecna from Stranger Things. They're always saying that about Vecna, that he smells amazing. It feels like we're living in this end stage of capitalism where brands and corporations aren't even really trying to keep the curtain up anymore. The quality of everything is going down while prices continue to go up. I can't even watch Stranger Things legally anymore because Netflix decided that its paying customers shouldn't have the right to share their accounts with a family member. And some of these big studios no longer seem to care about brand integrity or image. I saw the same thing happen with Wicked for Good last year. I don't know if Universal doesn't realize that plastering their IP all over Swiffer mops and makeup palettes and a $450 Le Creuset Dutch oven makes the movie look cheap and tacky, or if they just don't care. Ditto with Netflix and Stranger Things. To me, it seems like they're actively damaging the reputation and legacy of the show by whoring it out like this, but maybe that's a price they're willing to pay for infinite money. Actually, when put like that, it does make a good deal of sense. But speaking of good deals and sense, today's video is sponsored by Rocket Money. I'm just kidding. Can you imagine? Grievance number 2, beating a dead horse. You may or may not be familiar with the concept of Flanderization. I'm going to be a dweeb and just cite tvtropes.org. The TV Tropes English Dictionary defines Flanderization as taking a single, often minor action or trait of a character within a work and exaggerating it more and more over time until it completely consumes the character. The term is of course named for the Simpsons character Ned Flanders, whose presence as a folksy, all-American foil to Homer has gradually devolved into a more simplistic, stereotypical send-up of evangelical Christianity over the course of the show. Generally, it's when we see a lovable or otherwise memorable character quirk become overbearing, and it can often impede character development by reducing a character to one or two defining traits rather than exploring their complexities. Think The Office, where Michael Scott goes from a silly and incompetent but well-intentioned boss to a complete clown idiot man-child. Or, for a more specific character trait, Parks and Rec, where Leslie Knope's affinity for waffles begins as a one-off joke and eventually snowballs into one of her defining character traits.
You sure you're cool with JJ's Diner catering what you've referred to as the wedding of the millennium?
This isn't always a bad thing, to be clear. It's hard to avoid on long-running shows, especially comedies, but it can be part of a larger dumbing down of the writing. And speaking of waffles, Stranger Things has this problem in droves. As I mentioned, season 1 sees Eleven try Eggo waffles for the first time while hiding out in Mike's house, and later in the season, while alone on the run, she shoplifts Eggos from a supermarket, presumably just because it's one of the only foods there that she recognizes and knows she likes. But over the next 4 seasons, you'd think that she needs Eggo waffles to survive.
I guess I'm just gonna have to, enjoy this triple-decker Eggo extravaganza on my own.
Hey, Al. I made you some Eggos, but they're getting kind of cold.
We still have some more of that waffle mix. And I think we should celebrate this record time with a stack of those.
Have you guys tried introducing her to any other foods? There's no way she's getting enough fiber. Steve's unlikely friendship with Dustin also gets pretty Flanderized by the end of the show. It starts as a naturally occurring odd couple pairing. These two characters have both been somewhat cast out by their regular social circles, and they happen to team up. Audiences really loved this dynamic when season 2 premiered. Aw, Steve is the begrudging babysitter now. That sure is a funny thing to see this vapid popular guy develop into. By season 3, the show is self-aware about it. You know Steve, he's the guy who's always hanging out with kids, not in a weird way.
Hey, Dingus, your children are here. How many children are you friends with?
In season 4, when Eddie is introduced as another older teen that befriends Dustin, he and Steve compare notes about being unlikely friends with Dustin.
Jesus Christ, this kid's gotta get his ego in check.
It's his tone, right?
In the same season, we have to hear Steve's nauseating fantasy about wanting a whole army of kids.
It's silly, but I've actually, I always had this dream that I'd have this really big family. I'm talking like a full brood of Harringtons, like 5, 6 kids.
I'm sorry to be the one to tell the Stranger Things writers this, but the reason people liked Steve in that babysitter role in season 2 is because it was unlikely, not something he typically would do or be interested in, but something that he fell into unexpectedly that he ended up taking naturally to. Him having this secret desire to have a bunch of kids kind of ruins that. There's just something a lot less likable about the show being all nudge about this stuff versus naturally incorporating these traits and dynamics into the story. You can tell the difference. The former feels cynical and try-hard, like they're throwing cheap references to earlier seasons at us to try and get us invested in the current one, rather than going to the effort of making new memorable moments. You see it in some of the general characterization, too. Hopper has this great storyline with Elle in season 2 where he struggles to adjust to being a parent again, let alone to this strange child who's unaccustomed to a lot of everyday things, and Elle struggles with being essentially held captive by him for her own safety. It ends up reminding her of her abusive, exploitative upbringing where she was literally held captive.
You are like Papa!
You see them both make mistakes and say things they don't mean, and both grow as people and learn to better communicate with and understand each other. And then comes season 3, when it comes to parenting, Hop has been reduced to this oafish man-child who has no idea how to communicate with his adoptive daughter.
I'm just gonna lose it. I mean, I am gonna lose it, Joyce.
Just take it down, Hopper.
I need for them to break up.
I get that his first child died young, and therefore he has never truly navigated some of these adolescent hurdles, but it still feels like the show is dumbing him down to a huge degree here, trying to take his gruff, sometimes ill-mannered personality from the first 2 seasons and make that all he is for comedic effect. In season 2, Hop only blows up at Elle once she's run away, potentially endangering them both, and started to yell at him and break things, and he later makes up with her and has a more genuine conversation. In season 3, he is so unable to control his emotions or communicate at all that he lies to 14-year-old Mike that his grandma is deathly ill to get him out of his house.
She needs you home right away.
Is everything okay?
No, I don't think so. It's your grandma.
Then threatens and intimidates him to get him to stop seeing Elle.
Crazy. You want to see real crazy? You disrespect me again.
And this actually never gets resolved. He just fake dies at the end of the season, and he gets to retroactively mend fences because Elle reads a heartwarming script that he supposedly intended to use to talk to her and Mike about boundaries. I kinda have trouble buying that the guy who immediately went to this tactic
It's your grandma.
would have been capable of writing this letter on the same day in response to the same situation.
Keep on growing up, kid. Don't let me stop you. Make mistakes, learn from them. And when life hurts you, because it will, remember the hurt.
And then, you could start to create some boundaries.
Boundaries.
You can't really have it both ways. In seasons 4 and 5, Robin goes from being a cool, sardonic girl who maybe occasionally word vomits in an anxious moment to being a character whose entire personality is word vomiting and being awkward and occasionally peppering extremely literal, unfunny cultural references into her conversation.
Great Scott!
Let her up, Frankenstein.
Mouse Frankenstein!
I don't think I dislike Maya Hawke, but Robin in season 5 makes me feel like I dislike Maya Hawke.
Yours truly was watching slack-jawed as the earth split open beneath her feet and coughed up that tsunami of mysterious dandruff.
I just think all of this is a big part of what makes the final couple of seasons feel so different from the first couple seasons. Everything is a self-aware gimmick, not earnest characterization or development. Everything is an overplayed bit, a dead horse the show refuses to stop beating. Grievance number 3, overcomplicating things. So season 1 of Stranger Things is really a rather simple story at heart. There are a few different threads happening simultaneously, but the crux of it is how a child's supernatural disappearance radiates through his community. I've seen it described as a multi-genre show. You see the kid characters living out this Spielbergian adventure, the teens in more of a horror action story, and the adults unraveling a conspiracy thriller. Importantly, although not everything is explained in the season, for example, we don't know exactly why or how the Upside Down exists, or the exact circumstances surrounding Dr. Brenner's experimentation on telekinetic children, the story is conclusive. You finish it with the kinds of questions that invite further exploration of the show's world, but not with the kinds of questions that leave you feeling confused or unsatisfied. I'd say the same is largely true of the second season. I really like season 2, for the record. I love how much it leans into the Halloween vibes. I think doing this possession and exorcism storyline with Will was a great and creative place to take the story after season 1. I love the Hopper and Elle storyline, the Bob storyline, the Lucas and Max storyline. I love that Dustin adopts a little creature that turns out to be an upside-down monster. That kind of thing is so fun and fits in so well with the type of 80s media the show is referencing. I've seen a lot of people write the season off almost entirely because of the 7th episode, The Lost Sister, since it's such a departure from the usual show, but honestly, on rewatch, I think this episode is fine. It's different, sure, but it accomplishes what it needs to for the season. It's an Elle character development episode. It works. This is actually the only only season, besides 5, I guess, that has something of a happy ending. There's a hint of foreboding, but it's pretty much conclusive. I think seasons 1 and 2 are a pretty good show. If you haven't watched Stranger Things and are thinking about it, I would stop there after season 2. It's in season 3, and especially seasons 4 and 5, where I think, in attempts to keep upping the ante and make each season bigger and more exciting than the last, the show's plot becomes increasingly convoluted, incredulous, and difficult to follow. And in my opinion, plot minutia is like the least interesting thing a story can offer. Of course, plot is important, but especially in the final seasons of a show like this, I'm more interested in the character arcs being resolved and the emotional stakes of the story. I think the problem really starts in season 3. It's still a reasonably enjoyable season, but it takes a while to get going, and once it does, there are parts of it that are comically convoluted. My favorite is the Billy thread in this season. First, he gets possessed by the Mind Flayer, much like Will did in season 2, except not like that because Billy is on some sort of mission from the Mind Flayer to infect other people, and they start to turn into these eerie Stepford Wife-style robotic versions of themselves. So now it's like a Stepford Wives zombie story. But then the people also start to turn into goo, which creates a big blob monster. So now it's a big blob monster story. But then all the possessed people melt down into goo and turn into the physical form of the Mind Flayer. So now it's a kill the Mind Flayer story. But what a strange route we took to get here. And don't even talk to me about the wild goose chase Joyce and Hopper have to be on for this season. Murray is still here for some reason. I didn't particularly like him in season 2, but I could accept the presence of a conspiracy theorist as a one-off character. He's back for season 3, and from this moment on, he essentially becomes the Mary Sue of the show, if you'll pardon the expression. The Murray Sue. We can't not have Murray back for season 3. He's the only person in town who speaks Russian. Apparently. Of course we need Murray for season 4. He knows karate. Apparently. And how would our characters make it through season 5 without Murray, who's a smuggler now? Apparently, so I'm told. You've also got this Russian scientist and the corrupt mayor of Hawkins and this Russian hitman. It's just a lot of minutia for one side of the season's story. It feels like a lot of the season's threads could have benefited from some streamlining. Season 4 is so much worse. First of all, the season is almost twice as long in runtime as each of the previous 3 seasons. I really don't know why that was necessary. It starts off pretty engaging, but as things get more and more convoluted and less grounded in reality, it's a bit of a slog to finish. I won't touch on Vecna too much here because I have an entire ensuing grievance dedicated to Vecna as a whole, but I think that entire reveal and backstory is pretty inexcusable on a lot of levels, not least because of how much weird, contrived bullshit has to be retroactively added to the story to make it work. Remember how in seasons 1 and 2, it was heavily implied that 11 and any other of Dr. Brenner's telekinetic kids were the result of government experiments like MKUltra? Well, that's actually not true anymore. Instead, there was one kid who had magic powers, seemingly inherently, though that changes in season 5, who was evil and crazy and killed his entire family, but pinned it on his dad and was kidnapped by Brenner, who faked the child's death so that he could study him in captivity, but he was too evil and crazy, so Brenner put a power-suppressing implant in him and forced him to work as an orderly in Hawkins' lab while experimenting on other children, and then said orderly manipulated 11 into setting him free, after which he massacred all the other children at the lab because he's evil and crazy. After which, 11 used her telekinetic powers to open up a gate to the Upside Down and banish him there, upon which the physical trauma made him into a scary vine monster, and now he's trying to kill 4 teenagers in Hawkins. Not straightforwardly, though. He psychologically tortures them until finally snapping all their bones, so that he can open 4 gates to the Upside Down to tear Hawkins in half because he wants to remake the world world or whatever because he's evil and crazy. If you haven't watched the show, I'm not kidding, that's what Vecna is, and none of this had even been hinted at in the show prior to season 4. They just dump all of this on you and expect you to take it in stride. He also has 3 names. His given name was Henry Creel. He was called One by Dr. Brenner since he was the first child to be experimented on in his program, and the kids have dubbed him Vecna because of Dungeons and Dragons. I feel like the name thing alone kind of exposes how needlessly convoluted this all is, and the show even acknowledges how silly and confusing it is.
We were wrong about Vecna. Henry. One. Sorry, what are we calling him now?
One.
Vecna.
One.
Henry. Right.
And it's like, you're the show. If you didn't want it to be so silly and confusing, you could have simply not written it that way. I'm not endeared by you poking fun at the messiness of your own writing. Try writing something good next time. By season 5, there's so much plot to establish that almost every scene is just characters explaining the plot to each other.
We break into the Upside Down the only way we can. Through the Maxi gate, under the cover of a burn. Once inside, we search one zone at a time, methodically.
If your theory's right, and my receiver is proximity-based, I need to get close to the demo to tap into the hive mind.
Vecna's like a psychic serial killer. He stalks his victims, but he does it by invading their minds.
Look, I think this circular flesh wall is Vecna's version of an energy shield.
No wonder the doctors are so clueless. Max was never in a coma.
She was in a trance.
Just like Will. Just like Holly.
More specifically, an interdimensional bridge that rips through space-time. It is wildly unstable, but held together by exotic matter, which we found dead center right above the lab.
I've heard a lot of criticism directed at a lot of the performances in this season, but to be absolutely fair, the dialogue at hand is so dense and laborious that at times, even the most capable actors on the show kind of sound like they learned their lines phonetically.
We get Will close to the hive mind. Once he is, he jacks back in. Only this time he doesn't go after a demo. He goes after Vecna.
Season 5 feels rushed, somehow overwritten and underwritten at the same time. By the end of the season, a lot has technically happened, but it doesn't really feel like we've gotten to spend much time with our characters or allowed nearly enough space for the culmination of their development. It's because they added way too much. The plot is overstuffed, the cast is overstuffed, and it means there's not enough room for anything to connect. Less is more sometimes. It seems like they got way too caught up in expanding the world and lore and lost sight of the things people actually liked about the show. The initial characters, their relationships to each other, their coming of age, the sense of wonder. Nobody cares if the Upside Down is a wormhole to a bigger, scarier Upside Down, or that Vecna got his powers from a magical rock he found in a cave. We wanted to see a satisfying conclusion to the story. You had one job. Grievance number 4, Vecna. Jumping off of that last one, let's talk a little more about Vecna, aka Henry, aka One, aka the reason the show got bad. As I've said, I think Vecna's introduction and backstory are far too convoluted. I also dislike how much retconning and retroactive exposition his inclusion necessitates. I think that's a sign something isn't a great fit for a story, if you have to do all that to make it make sense. But other than that, I mainly want to explain why I think making Vecna the big bad of the show makes everything fundamentally less interesting. It's already a bold and arguably very misguided move to introduce a main villain of a show in the 4th of 5 seasons. When season 4 came out, I remember there being interviews where the Duffer Brothers claimed to have always planned for Vecna to be the ultimate villain of the story. I'm sorry, but I don't believe that for a second. That seems like an obvious lie from the way this storyline comes out of nowhere in season 4. If it is somehow true, then they did a pretty shitty job of it. This was an extremely weird way to incorporate a villain that was supposedly in development since season 1.
We didn't know Vecna in season 1. We didn't know really what was going on, why he was there.
But my big problem with Vecna comes down to motivation, I guess. Before anyone tries to be annoying in my comments about it, I want to say that I am aware that there is a Stranger Things stage play, Stranger Things: The First Shadow, that premiered on the West End in 2023 and eventually opened on Broadway, that provides more backstory and motivation to Henry's character. But here's the thing, I don't care. I haven't watched it, and I don't plan to. I certainly wasn't going to for this video. This is ultimately a TV show, and I refuse to accept that I should have to watch really any extracurricular media, let alone a stage play that doesn't even have a pro shot. You'd have to see it in person or obtain an illegal bootleg if you want to watch it for the events of the show to make complete sense or to be completely satisfying. I think that's a joke. I think it's asinine. No hate if you like the play. I'm not saying it's bad. I just don't think I should have to factor its content into my assessment of the show. That's crazy. That's cuckoo bananas. So disregarding whatever character development or motivation Vecna might have in the play that I haven't seen, Vecna's motivation as a villain is thin to non-existent. From all the information presented to us in season 4, the story seems to imply that Henry Creel was simply a born psychopath who was inherently evil and crazy and craved violence and destruction because that's how he inherently was. And I can't be alone in thinking that this is extremely boring.
Something was wrong with me. All the teachers and the doctors said I was broken, they said.
What's interesting about Dr. Brenner, or the government as villains in season 1, is that they are human. They have real-world human flaws like greed and warmongering, motivating them to keep Elle captive, to try and use her powers to kill anyone who gets in their way. With Brenner specifically, he and Elle have a complex emotional connection. They have something of a parent-child relationship, albeit an abusive one. Brenner is a complex character. He's human. We can understand him because we're familiar with people like him. It's grounded in reality. There is nothing grounded in reality about Vecna. He doesn't seem to have any relatable motivations for anything. Why is he evil? Because he's evil. Why did he fixate on Elle? She reminds him of himself for unclear reasons. Why did he take Will first? Unclear. They try to explain it a little in season 5, but it's not very convincing.
That's why, out of everyone in Hawkins, he chose me. Because he knew I was weak and he knew he could control me.
I watched a few season 5 behind the scenes videos after completing my rewatch, and I didn't find them that illuminating. It's mostly just the actors talking about how great of a time they had filming the season, which if anything just annoyed me further.
It was so beautiful to be with everybody, and I think everyone just felt extremely close to each other.
Which was super fun to film. It was a really fun day.
It's one of those like pinch me of like, this is kind of sick. My job is really cool.
Like, yeah, I'm sure it was fun for you. I don't care if you guys had fun. I wanted to have fun. But I did find this one bit from Jamie Campbell Bower, who plays Vecna, very revealing.
Henry's been watching Holly for some time, and he's chosen her.
I thought Blackberries might cheer you up a little.
And I really had to think like long and hard as to why Holly.
They didn't have a motivation for him, a reason for the initial inciting incident of the story to make sense. The actor had to rack his brains for one. How embarrassing. Why does Vecna have powers? Well, like I said, in season 4, they appear to be intrinsic, but in season 5, we actually discover that as a young boy, Henry found a paranoid, wounded man in an abandoned mine shaft who was holding a briefcase, and after attacking this man in self-defense, Henry opened the briefcase and found a glowing rock. And this gave him powers, and I guess he wasn't actually necessarily evil since birth. Instead, the rock was somehow connected to the Mind Flayer, who sort of gave him a choice to use the rock powers or not, and Henry chose to use them, which meant that he was controlled by the Mind Flayer from then on. Again, I might understand this situation better if I watch the play, but again, I don't think I should have to. The show should be enough. Maybe the wiki can tell me what really happened. This man, a spy for the Soviet Union, was previously stationed at a nearby military base in Nevada. At this military base, Dr. Martin Brenner and other scientists made early attempts at interdimensional travel. Brenner and the scientists knew travel to at least one alternate dimension was possible due to an incident involving the USS Eldridge from 10 years prior in 1943. Before the spy defected from the Nevadan base, he stole the silver briefcase, which contained a strange glowing glowing stone. The stone likely originated from the Abyss, the same dimension where the Eldridge was taken in 1943. Upon touching the stone, Henry experienced a vision of a shadowy entity telling him to find me, as the stone transformed into particles that entered Henry's gunshot wound. The particles took residence in Henry's amygdala, the fear center of the brain. Cool. This story began with a mother uncovering a government conspiracy to rescue her missing son from a Lovecraftian nightmare dimension. It was mysterious and spooky and grounded in a real human story. And as the culmination to this story, the same mother just takes an axe and chops the head off of a big swamp thing looking monster in a season that's been so bogged down with trivial plot details that there's barely any tangible human connection to any of the events. Why should I care? What is interesting or scary or relatable about this guy?
I mean, the thing that's cool is the giant monster.
Our complex human villains have been replaced with the creature from the Black Lagoon. I would rather watch the creature from the Black Lagoon. At least it's 49 minutes shorter than the Stranger Things finale. Grievance number 5, Will and related issues. Okay, I've struggled a lot with how to approach this one. I know Will isn't everyone's favorite character to begin with. Not only is he played by a guy who apparently thinks Zionism is sexy, but there's also been a decent amount of criticism leveled at said actors' acting in these last couple seasons. I went into season 5 with an open mind about this because, in my experience, people online love to conflate someone's morals with their talent, and the sad fact is that bad people actually can be good at what they do, and vice versa. It's nice to imagine that the two are related, but they're not necessarily. That said, I do have to agree with at least some of the criticism. To be fair, like I said before, I think just about everyone in the cast struggles in this season because of the quality of the writing, but Noah Schnapp's performance does stand out at times as particularly unnatural or overwrought.
Whatever it is, whatever he's planning, we have to stop him. And we have to save Derek.
I don't want to sound overly mean, but part of it is that he has just grown into having a kind of unfortunate crying face, and he spends a lot of his screen time in season 5 crying. As if all that weren't enough, this is also a character that is in some ways primed to be disliked. Part of his characterization is that his development is somewhat stunted by trauma. He retains some childish interests and ideas. From season 3 on, they even style him in this dorky, mismatched, ill-fitting way, as if he's learned what clothes are, but not that it's possible to combine them in aesthetically pleasing ways. But despite all that, in many ways I like the character of Will, and when I first watched the show, back when season 4 was coming out, I thought he had some potential. And then as season 4 went on, and especially throughout season 5, I feel like I watched the show not just squander all of that potential, but actively add so much insult to injury. I guess it starts in season 3. Will has this interesting arc where throughout the season, he's watching his friends grow up and start to care more about relationships and teenage concerns than their former, simpler childhood interests, and Will isn't ready to move on from that stuff. As I said, it's like he's been stunted a little by what happened to him in seasons 1 and 2, and he's trying to cling to the childhood that's been robbed from him. It's also implied to practically made clear by this season that Will might be gay, which is presumably also contributing to his difficulty relating to his peers.
You're destroying everything, and for what? So you can swap spit with some stupid girl? Elle's not stupid. It's not my fault you don't like girls.
Eventually, he has a big fight with his friends and angstily destroys Castle Byers, the fort he and his brother built together as kids. It pretty clearly symbolizes Will forcing himself to put away childish things, having become disenchanted with the things he used to care about. It's a big moment for him, a loss of innocence.
Stupid. Stupid.
So you'd think that this moment would result in a change in Will from one season to the next, But come season 4, he's kind of just the same. You can tell he's getting older, he's a little more reserved, but he basically still seems interested in the same things, and at times even seems like he's still operating with the same stunted maturity we saw in the previous season.
We could just play D&D and Nintendo for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, totally.
So what was the point of all that? I feel like the time skip from season 3 to season 4 could have been a fun opportunity to show a real change in Will. Imagine if we picked up in 4 and he was like goth or something. But no, he's just a straight line. Well, not a straight line. The only real difference in Will in season 4 is that he now has a pretty explicit crush on his friend Mike. It's arguable that this was implied in previous seasons, but it's never been overt until now. Will is clearly upset by Mike making him into a third wheel and otherwise treating him badly early in the season, and eventually it's revealed that Will, who's an artist, has been creating this corny, lovesick painting for Mike, depicting him as a D&D knight with a big heart on his shield.
Because, I mean, without heart, we'd all fall apart.
I don't know why that line rhymes. It's so distracting. This is why you revise, people. This development is when things start to get weird, I guess. Throughout the season, Will is pining after Mike, but Mike is worried about his relationship with Elle because she got fed up with him when he was unable to tell her he loved her.
From Mike. From Mike. From Mike. From Mike. From. Okay.
It's so brutal. Why would he do that? And Will is, I guess, so selflessly invested in Mike and Elle's relationship working out that he actually lies and tells Mike that Elle commissioned this painting from him, and that therefore all of the corny lovesick sentiment in it is in fact Elle's, not Will's.
Did you paint this?
Yeah. I mean, Elle asked me to. She commissioned it, basically. I mean, she told me what to draw.
Fair enough. It's a little contrived, but it works as a way to depict this conflict, I suppose. Now, given that this remains unresolved in season 4, you go into season 5 assuming that it will come up at some point, that Will's lie will be revealed, because it kind of has implications both for him and his friendship with Mike, but also for Mike and Elle's relationship, right? Mike seems to work up the courage to express his feelings for Elle, in part because of Will's encouragement here.
Mike, don't stop. Okay, you're the heart. Okay, remember that. You're the heart.
So to reveal that all of these feelings Mike thought Elle had communicated to Will were in fact not real, not related to her at all, seems significant. Something he'd want to know, at the very least. But you'll be shocked to hear that it just never comes up again. Never mentioned in season 5. Mike will presumably go to his grave thinking that this painting was genuinely the product of Elle's feelings for him. It's a little messed up, honestly, in my opinion. It's one of those lies that doesn't technically hurt anyone, but is still wrong. Kind of like the Dear Evan Hansen lie. Lower stakes, of course, but same principle. It distorts someone's idea of another person, and that's not right. It's also just weird given that this was practically Will's entire arc in season 4. He and Mike have very little to do throughout this season, so the crush, the painting, the lie, Mike's speech to Elle, that kind of is the extent of their important character stuff in season 4. So it makes it all the weirder that it's completely dropped in the final season. I want to clarify one thing here, which is that I am not involved in the Stranger Things fandom. Any petty fandom drama or ship nonsense is not of any interest to me. The Lion does not concern himself with the Stranger Things fandom. I'm aware of it existing and there being shippers and stuff, and no hate if you're part of it, but whatever I express here is divorced from that. I'm just giving my personal opinions. Please don't drag me into whatever ship stan wars you have going on. I do not consent. I bring this up because from what I understand, there are a lot of people who ship Will and Mike, and a lot of people who ship Elle and Mike, and a lot of people who ship any number of other character combinations on this show, ranging from the expected to the less expected, and they're all very passionate, and I don't want to kick any hornets' nests. That said, I do think this love triangle of sorts, whatever these three have going on, is interesting and had some potential and was ultimately really fumbled by the show. I'm not saying it had to end with any particular romantic combination. I'm easy. I was kind of interested in the Mike and Will thing when I first watched season 4. At that point, the show does make it seem like it's going somewhere, not necessarily with them having a romance, but at least with it affecting their friendship, perhaps a revelation between them about Will's sexuality. I don't know. Anything? Season 4 also opens the door for Will and Elle to have a bond. They've been living as siblings for several months, and they do seem to have developed some kind of familial bond. And that's interesting. Two people who really care about each other liking the same person can be interesting. There's also the aforementioned issue of Mike having these struggles in his relationship with Elle. Why can't he tell her he loves her? The finale of the season gives us an on-paper answer, but I can understand why some people watching might have thought there was more to this. There's also an implication at the very end of the season that Elle will have to strike out on her own to finally conclude the story. This pretty on-the-nose staging in the final moments of the season seems to hint at her leaving the others behind. To the show's credit, that does end up being accurate foreshadowing, but not really for the reasons anyone wanted, I think. More on that later. So coming off of that season, I wasn't really sure where this would go, but I hoped it would be satisfying for all three characters. And in the end, it was arguably not for any of the three characters. There's honestly not much to say about Mike. Mike kind of just stops having character development sometime in season 4, and he decides to make it everyone's problem. He spends much of season 4 being a pretty bad friend to Will, being oblivious to both Will and Elle's feelings, and finally giving a corny, unearned speech about how he actually does love Elle. By season 5, he's kind of just there. He doesn't change at all, he doesn't learn anything. He learns that he has to accept the death of his girlfriend, I guess. You can tell he's grieving because his hairline is receding now. I can't say that. You can tell he's grieving because he has a side part now. But that's all squeezed into the final 30 or so minutes of the finale. It's not a season-long arc. He is seemingly oblivious to Elle's intentions to die right up until it happens. They try to pretend that he has a meaningful relationship with his little sister, who gets taken by Vecna in this season, but that all rings pretty hollow since the show has never tried to develop it before this season, and because, like everything else, the Holly storyline doesn't elicit any change in Mike, so I don't think that counts as character development. He's literally just chilling. He just does boring plot stuff for the entire season, and then at the very end, the show tries to emotionally manipulate us into feeling like he's had some kind of meaningful arc over the course of the story, because he cries in his basement. I'm not buying it. He went from being a kind of snarky kid who liked to play D&D and was reasonably brave and passionate to being a kind of snarky teen who likes to play D&D and is reasonably brave and passionate. Great. Groundbreaking. What happens with the Will arc in season 5, you ask? Well, the Duffers have apparently realized that they only have 8 episodes left to wrap up the storylines of all 5 billion characters they've introduced over the course of the show, so they give Will a frankly pathetic and embarrassing rushed coming out storyline. Robin, our other gay character, ends up kind of taking him under her wing after he accidentally discovers she's a lesbian, and I think this is fine. It's a move that makes sense, although, like I've already said, I find Robin insufferable this season, so I wasn't exactly enjoying all of these scenes.
So you wanna
skip school, play hooky, connect your brain into an interdimensional monster's radio signal, and save little Wheeler? Yeah. Kind of.
It does also feel pretty rushed. Again, they're trying to hastily wrap this up, so it feels like they're kind of speed running the gay mentor relationship. Practically every conversation they have is just Robin giving Will life-changing gay self-acceptance advice, and Will immediately taking it to heart and crying, usually. It has no room to breathe or develop naturally. I think the way they deal with Will's crush on Mike is especially weird. The show very clearly shuts down any potential romance between Will and Mike about halfway through the season when Robin picks up on Will having a crush and tells him a lengthy story about her own teenage crush on a straight girl and how it was never really important because what really mattered was her self-actualization.
I was looking for answers in somebody else, but I had all the answers.
This would be fine, but there are a couple of big problems here. For one thing, as I've described, Will liking Mike was kind of his entire thing in season 4, and even led to this potentially complicated lie between him, Mike, and Elle, so it kind of demands some resolution that the show is apparently unwilling to give. And perhaps more importantly, the girl Robin liked, Tammy, was essentially not a character. She was mostly just a mention who we briefly met in season 4 for comedic purposes. Mike, on the other hand, is one of our main characters. In some seasons, he's the closest thing we have to a protagonist. It doesn't really work to brush off Will's crush as just being his Tammy, when the reality is that Mike is his best friend and another main character on the show. Narratively, it's a lot more complicated and significant, and therefore, again, demands more resolution than this. I've already said I'm not particularly interested in shipping on this show. I didn't need Will's feelings to be reciprocated, but I also think the way season 5 dismisses the entire conflict so soundly is a bit of a cop-out, and a little insulting to all parties involved. So much of Will's storyline with his sexuality up to this point has involved Mike, and yet in season 5, Mike is pretty much not a part of it at all. Much like with Elle, he remains innocently oblivious to everything going on with Will until it's spelled out to his face, so we never get any real catharsis for this. They don't even have a conversation about it until the very last episode after Will has come out, and it's like 30 seconds long and doesn't really get to the heart of the matter at all. Will doesn't even get to accept Mike's apology for not being there for him. Mike can do no wrong, apparently.
You don't have to be sorry. And you are not an idiot.
He kind of does, and he kind of is. Don't even get me started on this moment.
And you still think we can be friends?
Friends? No thanks. Best friends.
What is his problem? Genuinely. This is what I mean when I say Mike stopped having character development. At a certain point, it's like he's no longer allowed to have flaws or agency. Nothing is his fault. God forbid he have to do or learn something. I really don't get this. What were they afraid of? Then there's the coming out itself. At this point in the writing process, I felt so annoyed that I had spent so much time thinking and caring and talking about a character played by Noah Schnapp that I also donated $200 to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, another worthy cause, if you're able. Anyway, I already think it's a little tone-deaf and revealing that the writers apparently thought that coming out had to be Will's end-all be-all. It feels like a very small-minded, very straight way of looking at the gay coming-of-age experience. I do think it makes sense for Will to acknowledge that he's gay and come out to some people in his life, his mom and brother, surely, perhaps his circle of closest friends. I do not think it makes a lot of sense for him to come out TED Talk style to an audience of like 30 people. Thank God Murray was here when he came out. I don't know what we would have done without the loving acceptance of Murray. Has Will ever even spoken to Murray? I'm really glad Steve Harrington was there, and Robin's girlfriend that Will's never met. The reverse shot of the absolute crowd gathered in front of him as he delivers this speech is crazy. It's so weird. The monologue itself is pretty sloppy. Will is trying to say that in many ways he is like his male peers, but the one way he isn't is of course being gay. But the way that they have him do this is by describing things he and his friends like to do together, and it just goes on for a little too long. For a few hysterical moments, you start to wonder if perhaps the entire rest of this scene will just be Will listing fun activities.
We like playing D&D late into the night, and we like that old person smell in Mike's basement, and we like biking to Melvaults for malted milkshakes and arguing about what to rent and settling on Holy Grail for the millionth time. And we like drinking Coke with Pop Rocks. And we like bike races and trading comics and NASA and Steve Martin and Lucky Charms.
As others have pointed out, it is also a little wild that he includes getting lost in the woods as something he likes to do with his friends, when, you know, I think the coming out scene really lays bare the lack of respect the writers had for this storyline. If I didn't find his views so objectionable, I'd feel pretty bad for Noah Schnapp. It all kind of hammers home that Will's arc has been nothing more than one long humiliation ritual. Cringe. There's no other word for it. This makes me cringe. It's embarrassing. Grievance number 6, 11. Content warning for suicide. I hate the Duffer Brothers. As I mentioned earlier, I've had the misfortune of watching some behind-the-scenes content for Stranger Things 5. I never actually finished the big Netflix documentary that came out following the season. I started it, but it was immediately apparent to me that it was less of a truly insightful making-of documentary and more of a padded nostalgia trip for super fans of the show, so I didn't think it would be of much use. I'm aware of some of the bits that have been memed on, and with a lot of them, I'm not sure what to think. Like the revelation that the series finale entered production before the script was finalized.
We went into production without having a finished script for the finale.
On paper that looks bad, but I honestly know less about TV production than I do film, and I've seen some say that this isn't necessarily unusual for some television productions. It's hard to say. Does it feel a little embarrassing that a show known for taking some of the longest hiatuses between seasons in the biz was still in the active writing stage this late in the process? Yes, obviously, but I ultimately don't feel like I know enough about the inner workings of the production to judge this too harshly. There's also the allegation that you can see ChatGPT tabs open on the Duffers' computers in some shots. I would love to believe that this one's real. It certainly would be funny and would give us a convenient scapegoat, but I honestly can't make out what favicon this is. It's too blurry. So I don't feel like I can run with that one as fact. But one thread depicted in this documentary, as well as in an episode 8 companion featurette I watched, that I did find incredibly revealing, concerns the fate of the character 11. If I had to choose one excerpt that disturbed me the most, it's this one.
It's just so beautiful and cathartic and something that I've been wanting for a very long time. Personally, but also for 11, I just think it's incredibly important that it all ends for her and the suffering and pain ends.
So yes, if you haven't heard, 11 from Stranger Things, the traumatized, tortured little girl who spent most of her life knowing only abuse and exploitation, who escaped that life and finally found human connection, kindness, friendship, parental figures who loved her, she killed herself. Yes, she looked at everything she'd been through and everything the future held, and she decided to end it all. And this is a good thing, I've been told.
It all ends for her and the suffering and pain ends.
How to unpack this? I don't even have much to say because I feel like it largely goes without saying. It's so obviously egregious. This is some of the most counterintuitive, offensive character development I've ever seen. It really is beyond me why the people writing this show would think that the appropriate culmination to the story of a character, a child character who's spent the entire show healing from trauma, from childhood exploitation, would be to have her choose to die. I think it's at best highly tone deaf and at worst kind of inhuman. On one level, it's just bad storytelling. Throughout the season, you have Elle torn between essentially 2 points of view. That of Kali, who thinks that the two of them should sacrifice themselves to prevent the development of other experiment children, and that of Hopper and presumably the rest of Elle's loved ones, who think that suicide is not the answer, that there is surely another way that doesn't involve more death and suffering.
I have to end the cycle.
You will, but not like this, not with more violence.
And I think anyone who's consumed really any fiction of any kind, anyone familiar with any story, would naturally assume that the purpose of this arc with 11 would be to refute the former point of view and reinforce the latter. Generally, the pro-suicide argument in any given work of fiction will not be the one that prevails. Stranger Things 5, however, takes the bold, audacious stance that actually, maybe, sometimes, child suicide is the answer. This moment is shot and edited like a comedy beat, by the way.
She must have escaped.
Watching the Duffer Brothers gleefully plot out Elle's demise in the behind-the-scenes content is pretty unsettling.
The whole episode has to be building towards 11 is going to kill herself.
We think she's made the choice to live.
I don't know. Just kidding, she has it.
What disturbs me most, both in the making of features and the show itself, is the apparent lack of self-awareness as to what this is. There's an unwillingness to acknowledge Elle's actions in the finale as suicide. No one seems prepared to handle a subject as grave as teen suicide, and it doesn't even really seem like they understand that that's what they've written. It's treated like this vague, noble inevitability. Like, that's too bad, but it's what Elle chose for the mysterious greater good, and we just have to accept that and move on from our dull, sanitized grief. At the very least, it makes me question the Duffer Brothers' emotional intelligence, and at most, I question their very humanity. How can an ensouled person write such a thing? Like, what is wrong with you? Actually, in case anyone's yelling it at the screen, yes, the show does have Mike hastily speculate that perhaps Elle actually faked her death through an elaborate ruse with Hopper, but I honestly think that's cope. Cope on Mike's part and cope on the show's part. It's clearly just a lame cop-out because the show has no spine when it comes to killing off characters. 11 is dead in all the ways that matter, and more importantly, either way, the show vindicated her choice to end her own life.
I know you don't believe you can have any of this, but I promise you, we will find a way to make it real.
Her suffering and pain ends. What a ghoulish way of looking at it. The lack of self-awareness is staggering, and the smug, yeah, we went there energy the Duffers seem to have about it makes it that much worse. Grievance number 7, Miscellaneous. This is the part where I list all my little annoyances that didn't fit neatly into other sections. 1. Jumping off of the Elle stuff, I think Purple Rain was an absolutely atrocious song choice for this emotional flashback montage.
The real me.
I never meant to call you when it's all wrong.
Prince was a great artist. This is a great song. It is completely wrong for this moment. It's such a big, emotional, dramatic song, which works great for Prince and for the film that it's from, but in this context, it comes off emotionally overwrought, melodramatic. It leaves the whole sequence feeling like a fan-made video.
I love you. I love you for exactly who you are.
2, I don't like this moment where Lucas calls Max sexy.
I'm sorry, you're just looking super sexy right now.
I really like Lucas and Max, and I realize that they're high school seniors at this point, but because the show has never treated this set of characters in such a grown-up way, and since, in fact, the show has in many ways kept them childlike for longer than makes sense, the effect is jarring and feels vaguely inappropriate. 3, speaking of the age disconnect, I found the choices of time jumps in the final season bizarre. Between seasons 4 and 5, 18 months are supposed to have passed, and there's another 18-month time jump between the climax of season 5 and the epilogue. Essentially, I think in both of these cases, that's way too long. 18 months is the longest time skip we've ever had between seasons, and in spite of that, very little seems to have changed between seasons 4 and 5. There are no big interesting changes in any of the characters, with the exception of maybe Dustin. Everyone is in basically the same place they were at the end of 4. Typically, the purpose of a time jump is to force change, to shake things up. Oh my god, Archie's in the army now. Betty's in the FBI. So what's the point in doing such a long time jump only to resume the story almost exactly where we left off? I imagine they did this almost exclusively to combat the criticism that the cast were aging out of their roles faster than the show's story was progressing. And I think that's dumb. Either commit to your slow timeline and accept that you'll have a bunch of 14-year-old characters who look 25, or commit to a big status quo altering time skip. Don't just do the time skip for no reason. The finale time skip is clumsy for different reasons. It's not uncommon for there to be a short time skip after a climactic moment in a story, but cutting right from the action to such a distant moment in time actually robs robs the climax of its potential cathartic emotional fallout. A year and a half later, all these characters have presumably already had time to process and grieve and reorient, and we didn't get to see any of it. We got to see Mike have a boring, generic conversation with Hopper on a bench. We didn't get to see how any other characters dealt with Elle's death or what implications the end of the Upside Down had for anyone. 4. Something that really annoyed me about season 5 was what I perceived as a general dumbing down of the characters and interactions on the show. Everything has become so generic. Dialogue between characters who have known and loved each other for seasons on end will just be like, "Don't worry, it'll be okay, because we're friends."
We stay true to ourselves. We're supposed to stay true to our friends. We stand up for what's right, no matter the cost.
Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve's dynamic has been watered down into this juvenile competition for Nancy's affections. It's like elementary school stuff. The epilogue in particular feels like a pale, cliche imitation of what the show once was. They start the epilogue playing Fleetwood Mac's Landslide, which is a great song, but has also become the most generic, boilerplate, sad nostalgia song in movies and TV. It's a personality-less choice.
This is the last thing I can do for you, baby.
Dustin gives a speech at graduation, and he's just like, all the bad stuff all these years actually had the silver lining of breaking down high school social stratification.
Because we were so divided into the jocks, the nerds, freaks, and in the chaos, all those walls broke down.
Even though that goes directly against everything we've ever seen of it on the show, including within this very season. It feels like they couldn't quite figure out what the theme of their show was, so they just made up some generic bullshit right at the end. Hopper and Joyce get engaged, and Hopper gives the most generic speech you've ever heard.
Will you spend the rest of your life with a tired, grumpy, stubborn old man?
And then the live musicians start playing At Last, the most generic, mature couple getting engaged song you've ever heard. Where's the specificity? Where's the identity? All of these things feel like placeholders, going through the motions of things they've seen in other stories. It's like a child wrote it. 5. Season 4 wastes so much time trying to force the Steve and Nancy pairing back into existence, despite practically the entire point of it in seasons 1 and 2 being that they're not right for each other. And then in season 5, Nancy is just like, "Silly Jonathan, I never liked Steve that way."
No, I was never like that with him.
So what was the point of all that? Truly just time wasted. And they break up Nancy and Jonathan anyway for no reason. They try to gaslight us into thinking that they were only together because they were trauma bonded, which we all know not to be true. 6, if anyone's only together because of trauma bonding, it's Mike and Elle, but the show would have you believe that this is the ultimate tragic, star-crossed, true love story, which I find so weird. I'm already just not the biggest fan of kid romance. Whenever a show or movie has like 11-year-olds falling in love, I struggle to take it seriously, but it's a hallmark of the genre the first season was trying to emulate, so whatever. It has its place at that point in the story. As the show goes on, it gets harder and harder to believe that these two people who got together as little children are somehow meant to be together. On Mike's part, I don't mean to trivialize the real emotional bond he has with Eleven, but I did always kind of get the sense that any romantic feelings he projects onto her are probably just because he's a boy and she's a girl. That's how these childhood connections often go, and it's practically made explicit in the text.
Screw you, Mike! You're blind! Blind because you like that a girl's not grossed out by you!
Then there's Elle, a traumatized, abused child with little knowledge of how to navigate the world in general.
Friend?
Yeah, friend. Will?
What is friend?
Can she learn how to be a person before she has to learn how to be a girlfriend? I always wanted Elle to end up single, alive, but single, because I don't think someone on this huge of a journey at such a young age really needs any of that right now. It always felt a little reductive to keep Elle tethered to this childhood romance. I kind of think they should have stayed broken up in season 3, or perhaps season 4. I'm not very compelled by Mike's big romantic speech at the end of season 4. It's another one of those things that feels very generic and therefore devoid of real emotion. But as discussed, since Mike eventually stops having any character development, maybe maybe the writers felt that the only way to give him anything to do or any emotional impact was to keep him and Elle together, and that's not really fair to anyone involved, including us. 7. Season 4 has way too many cutesy monologues. I have a lot of petty grievances with season 4, but one of the more demonstrable ones is that way too many emotional beats in this season are forced by a long, overly affected monologue. There's this one with Steve.
I was a baby. I actually crawled backwards.
Crawled backwards?
I think, like, right out of the gate, like, I'm super confident, you know, but I'm also like an idiot. I mean, it's a brutal combination. But, I mean, the good news is, I get a big enough thump in my head, I can change, you know? I can learn. I can crawl forward.
The aforementioned one with Mike.
I'm sorry I don't say it more. It's not because I'm scared of you. I'm not. I've never felt that way. Never. But I am scared that one day you'll realize you don't need me anymore. And I thought that if I said how I felt, it would somehow make that day hurt more. But the truth is, hell, I don't know how to live without you. I feel like my life started that day we found you in the woods. You're wearing that yellow Betty's Burgers t-shirt, and it was so big it almost swallowed you whole. And I knew right then and there, in that moment, that I loved you.
Nope. Outside of D&D, I am no hero. I see danger and I just turn heel and run. Or at least that's what I've learned about myself this week.
But perhaps the most egregious is this one where Hopper just fucking goes off for like 5 minutes about all the trauma he's ever experienced in his life, including a bunch of stuff that we've never seen on the show, so feels a little manipulative.
I used to think I was cursed. Ever since I was 18. There's some letter of induction in the mail. Uncle Sam wants me to go fight some war in the jungle. 55-gallon drums of Agent Orange. Just these kitchen gloves, you know? Kids born, stillborn, dead in the womb. Crooked spines, eyes popped out. We had a baby and she was born healthy. She was perfect, you know, Sarah. And then Diane left me. She didn't blame me, but not with words. After that, I hid myself in drugs and alcohol. You were right what you said last night. I knew the risks. Breaking out of here, but I did it anyway. Everyone I love, I hurt. I am the curse.
I know it's a trite criticism, but these last couple seasons really struggle with telling over showing. A lot more developments happen through monologues and explaining scenes than through action. 8. This is gonna sound petty, but even the styling on the show began to bother me in the last couple seasons. I'm not sure how to explain it, but everything just kind of stops looking cool at a certain point. Maybe this just means I prefer early 80s styles to late 80s styles, but I don't know, there are some late 80s movies whose aesthetics I like. Why is Dustin always in a trench coat now? Why does Elle always have her hair in this lifeless ponytail? Why does she have to spend almost all of season 5 in these two, in my opinion, extremely ugly outfits? Mike even compliments the wetsuit at one point, and it's like, brother, the wetsuit does not look cool. I've already said Will dresses weird as hell. At least they fixed the hair a little in season 5. Season 4 was a dark time for him. Joyce and Hopper's outfits used to feel so authentic and lived in and would communicate so much. In this season, they range from forgettable to bizarre. Max spends most of the season in this hideous getup in Vecna's mind palace. It doesn't help that she and Holly are constantly under this garish, unforgiving desert green screen lighting. You might think I'm being superficial. I'm sure you could argue that there are story reasons for certain characters to look the way they do, but I don't really care, honestly. I think in a period piece that prides itself on its cool retro aesthetics, the characters should look cool. In past seasons, they looked cool. There were outfits on display that people wanted to own because they looked so cool. Nobody wants to dress like this. Nobody wants to do their hair like this. That's my ultimate, most vapid grievance. If the story and characters and acting are gonna be bad, at the very least you could make everyone look good. There are other things I could mention, I'm sure. Feel free to insert your personal grievance in the comments, but at a certain point, you have to know when to let it die. Or at least you should know that. So I'm wrapping it up here. I'm not sure what we can even take away from the nosedive of Stranger Things. There's not a lot particularly inspiring or instructive about it. I've seen a lot of attempts to rationalize what went wrong here, some more tenuous than others. The show got bad because the first season was plagiarized, people will tell you, pointing to the lawsuit levied at the Duffer Brothers in 2018. This isn't true. If you look into the actual case, it's a pretty classic Hollywood plagiarism accusation, nothing burger. Charlie Kessler wasn't even suing the Duffer Brothers for copyright infringement. He was suing them for breach of implied contract, and what he considered to be the implied contract was a conversation he had with the Duffer Brothers at a film festival networking event that supposedly ended in the brothers telling him, "We should work together." You know, the thing you say to people at networking events when you're trying to end the conversation and get them to leave you alone. There weren't any notable specific similarities between Stranger Things and Kessler's short film. Most of his case relied on both works originally being based around government conspiracies in Montauk, New York, which doesn't really hold water at all, considering that Montauk has a decades-long association with government experiment conspiracy theories. The show got bad because one of the Duffers' wives left him, and said wife was actually behind all the good parts of the show. I gotta hand it to this one, it is extremely funny as theories go, but I just don't really buy it. There was a whole team of people writing Stranger Things, and many of the biggest cracks in season 5 started to show in earlier seasons. The logic feels a little childish. As for Lee Janiak being the secret ghost auteur of Stranger Things, I appreciate the female empowerment we're doing here. I have enjoyed most of Janiak's work, and I don't doubt she had some unofficial input. If you're living and partnered with one of the showrunners, it'd probably be hard not to have some involvement.
She'll push, like, if she wants a DP to shoot an episode of Stranger Things, she will, like, tell the Duffers to, like, hire this DP, and they'll do it. And that's how literally everyone who's been there, who's like really like made a name for themselves on Stranger Things, has probably come through Lee somehow.
But again, I think the logic here is a little silly. There are a lot of industry regulations in place to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. It's kind of the whole point of having a guild. Credit disputes can get very messy. I kind of doubt that an uncredited contributor could have such an impact on the show as to be single-handedly responsible for its quality without there ever being any dispute about credit. Least of all once they're divorced. She'd have no incentive not to make that public. And finally, the wackiest of all, the show got bad because there's actually a secret 9th episode that will explain all of this and retroactively make it good. I didn't see fit to discuss what fans have dubbed Conformity Gate in this video. I've had people ask me to, but truthfully, I'm just not that curious about it. I've seen this film before. This is actually far from the first time this exact situation has happened in a fandom. Fandoms are not unlike conspiracy communities. They're vast echo chambers that tend to lose sight of the big picture in favor of myopic fan interests. This leads to a disconnection from reality. To outside observers, it may seem obvious that there is no 9th Stranger Things 5 episode. There were only 8 announced by Netflix. All official powers that be say that there are only 8, but to the in-group, there's a mountain of damning evidence, and every official communication is no doubt just another intentional misdirect. Of course they would say there's no 9th episode, but that's just to throw you off the scent so that you'll be all the more surprised when there is a 9th episode. We've seen it happen before with underwhelming series finales. It's a coping mechanism. When you've come to love a show, dedicated in some cases years of your life to it, it can be very difficult to accept that it didn't stick the landing or that it's no longer the thing you once loved. It's essentially an eccentric manifestation of the denial stage of grief. All the aforementioned rationalizations are just that. Rationalizations. I doubt any of them get anywhere close to the truth. We'd all love to believe that there's a simple, coherent explanation for why a show we once loved fell off a cliff, but these things are usually complex. There were so many people working on this show, so many variables. It's likely not something that comes down to one obvious smoking gun. If I were to try and put my finger on it, I think it's pretty bleak. just a tale of cynical factors in the entertainment industry, the first season of Stranger Things performed extremely well, leading Netflix to demand season after season from the Duffers. I'm sure their hearts were in it at first, but once you get to those late seasons, sure, they're still throwing money at you, and that's nice, but you're probably getting a little Stranger Things'd out. You probably have other things you want to make in your life. You're probably sick of having to think about these tired old characters. I know I am. It also seems like perhaps there were fewer and fewer creative restrictions as the show went on. More and more yes men. I can't imagine that some of these bad developments would have happened if first season at Netflix checks and balances were in place. Sometimes artists require limitations to stay on their toes. Perhaps the huge quantities of money at hand corrupted things. Once again, just look at all these brand deals. I've done a brand deal or two in my time, and I can tell you that being on deadline to a brand, having to worry about plopping an advertisement in the middle of your passion project, it's not always the most conducive to good, thoughtful art. By season 5, Stranger Things is no longer focused on being art. It's certainly not focused on being a story. It's focused on being a product, virtually indistinguishable from a package of branded Chips Ahoy. Eat up, consumers. It's what they've decided we deserve.
Well, you heard the man. There's your proof.
Proof that it's on your computer, not that Mandy Raines put it there.
So are you still saying there's nothing we can do?
I can go have a chat with her, tell her what we've discovered.
But she's not going to admit to anything.
No, probably not, but I have seen Stranger Things.